There comes a moment for every grower where drought stops being an inconvenience and becomes a direct threat to food security. You feel it when the soil hardens into something closer to pottery than earth. You feel it when plants wilt even after heavy watering. And you especially feel it when you start calculating how much water you used this week and how much you can realistically spare next week. During a season like that, most people panic about irrigation, sprinklers, pumps, and storage tanks. But the real solution doesn't start with infrastructure. It starts with choosing the right crops. Long before industrial farming, communities survived brutal dry seasons entirely because they planted vegetables selected over generations for their ability to thrive where rain barely touched the ground. If you want a garden that can handle the kind of droughts that are becoming more common without bleeding your water supply dry, this is the approach that matters most. The reason drought-proof vegetables matter is because soil moisture is more important than actual rainfall. One of the most misunderstood truths about drought farming is that plants don't just fail because rainfall is low. They fail because soil dries out faster than roots can adapt. That's why ancient agrarian societies always preferred crops that evolved in semi-arid regions. These vegetables develop genetic traits that let them continue producing even when the soil moisture swings between scarcity and abundance. Some form deep taproots, others slow their growth during harsh spells, and some develop waxy leaves that reduce water loss. Choosing crops with these built-in survival mechanisms means the difference between a garden that collapses the moment you skip a watering and one that just keeps producing. A practical way to internalize this is to think about where seeds originally came from. Vegetables with desert, Mediterranean, East African, Central Asian or Andean origins tend to be naturally drought-tolerant. When you grow these vegetables in modern homesteads or backyard plots, they continue using the same survival logic they developed centuries ago. So the more your region struggles with long, dry months, the more you should be leaning toward these varieties. Vegetables that evolved in arid climates tend to outperform traditional garden crops during water shortages. One of the strongest examples is cowpeas. For generations across West and East Africa, families relied on cowpeas when every other crop failed. Cowpeas send deep roots into the soil, pulling moisture from layers most vegetables never reach. They also enrich the soil with nitrogen, which means they grow even in depleted ground. For the modern grower, this means you can plant cowpeas early, water lightly during establishment, then let them run with minimal care. If you give them a mulch base, they barely need attention. Amaranth is another workhorse, used for thousands of years by indigenous communities in the Americas. It survives heat waves that can kill lettuce and spinach overnight. The leaves stay tender even under dry conditions, and the plant keeps producing continuously. If you're trying to build a garden that resists drought, planting amaranth is one of the most dependable steps you can take. And when you're working with tight space, one row of amaranth can feed a household while needing only a fraction of the water that brassicas demand. Okra deserves special mention because it thrives under extreme heat in a way very few vegetables can. Its tough stems, thick leaves, and deep roots allow it to remain productive long after other crops stop flowering. The practical application is straightforward. Plant okra early. Let the roots anchor deeply, and simply ensure the soil isn't allowed to completely bake during its first month. After that, it becomes one of the easiest vegetables to maintain in a water-scarce garden. Root crops provide hidden insurance because they store water internally. A forgotten truth about ancient diets is that root crops served as water reservoirs. Vegetables like sweet potatoes, cassava and Jerusalem artichokes hold internal moisture that sustains both the plant and the household. Sweet potatoes, for example, spread vines across the ground that act as living mulch. Those vines cool the soil, trap humidity, and prevent evaporation. If you plant slips into loosened soil and mulch heavily around them, the vines eventually create their own microclimate that protects the soil for months. Well, Jerusalem artichokes, also known as sunchokes, are nearly indestructible once established. They send their roots deep, store energy underground, and honestly, they tolerate neglect remarkably well. A single patch can feed you right through a dry season without any notable irrigation. Now, the key to using them strategically is selecting a permanent location, giving them space, and letting them form a colony that becomes your backup food supply during harsh conditions. Leafy greens adapted to drought really do provide dependable production when those tender vegetables just, well, collapse under the heat. Now, most gardeners think leafy greens simply can't survive drought, but honestly, this only applies to the usual European lettuces and spinach. Indigenous greens, though, tell a rather different story. African nightshade, spider plant, purslane and Malabar spinach keep growing when temperatures reach levels that would scorch your common greens. Purslane, in particular, has evolved as a water-storing succulent, you know. It grows in compact spaces, tolerates poor soil, and absolutely thrives under blazing sunlight. If you're farming during drought, adding these drought-adapted greens really does ensure you never have a season with empty harvest baskets. To put this into practice, start by establishing your drought greens section early on, give them a layer of mulch to stabilize soil moisture, and then just allow them to self-seed at the end of the season. Over time, they create a self-replenishing system that demands almost nothing from you. It's really quite remarkable. Drought-proof gardens truly succeed when they combine hardy crops with smart placement and proper soil preparation. Even the toughest vegetables, you see, benefit from a bit of thoughtful arrangement. If you plant drought-tolerant crops too close together, they end up competing for deep soil moisture. And if you place them on raised mounds, well, they dry out much faster. The method that consistently works best is to plant them in slight depressions with a thick mulch cover. This one simple adjustment can reduce water needs by as much as half. For example, planting okra in shallow basins funnels rainwater directly to the stem. Planting sweet potatoes in slightly sunken beds locks in moisture right where the vines will later create shade. It's a direct blend of ancient technique and modern practicality, I must say. Growing during drought isn't really about fighting nature with more water. It's about choosing vegetables that have already fought these battles for centuries and, well, won. When you plant drought-proof crops and support them with simple soil strategies, you gain a garden that can withstand even the harshest seasons with almost no irrigation at all. If you learned something valuable from this guide, do be sure to subscribe to the channel, share the video, and help others build resilient gardens that will keep producing no matter what the weather brings.